My official designation is Cultural Analyst Vixari, Grade 4, attached to the Interspecies Liaison Directorate. It is a title that implies a certain detachment, a clinical observation of alien cultures from a safe, academic distance. For most of my career, this has been true. I have studied the hive-mind poetry of the Jethar, the silicon-based theology of the Ool, and the commerce-driven mating rituals of the Cathar. In all of them, I found variations on themes we understood: community, hierarchy, spirituality, survival. They were different harmonic arrangements of the same fundamental music of existence. Then came the humans. To understand what happened, you must first understand my people, the coral. We do not experience the universe as you might. Our bodies are not opaque shells of flesh and bone. We are crystalline lattices, resonating with light and sound. Our very consciousness is a chord, a complex harmony of thoughts, emotions, and memories that hums within our translucent frames. Our cities are built of spun light and living crystal, vast cathedrals that sing in the winds of our homeworld, xylos. Communication, for us, is not merely the exchange of symbolic language. It is a sharing of resonance. To speak a truth is to emit a clear, stable chord. To lie is to create a dissonance, a grating, ugly sound that is physically painful to ourselves and to those around us. Because of this, our entire society is built upon a foundation of absolute honor. A being's word is a reflection of their inner harmony. A promise is a sustained note that, if broken, shatters one's own integrity. We have laws, of course, but they are primarily for catastrophic failures of character, not for regulating day-to-day interactions. The very idea of seeking a loophole is alien to our thinking. It would be like trying to find a way to breathe water, a nonsensical perversion of a natural process. The intent, the spirit of an agreement, is the agreement itself. We call this concept scifi, the soul or spirit of the endeavor. It applies to treaties, to contracts, and most especially to games. Games in choral society are not about mere victory. They are a form of collaborative art, a way to test intellect and strategy within a framework of shared beauty and respect. To win is admirable. To win with elegance, with a display of brilliant but respectful tactics, is the highest goal. To win through a technicality, through some obscure interpretation of a rule that violates the game's scifi, would bring not accolades, but shame. It would be a dissonant, jarring victory that would leave the winner feeling hollow and the losers feeling insulted, not bested. This was the world into which we welcomed Jacob Vance. He was the first human exchange liaison, a creature of staggering biological density. Where we were beings of light and vibration, he was solid, opaque matter. His thoughts were locked away behind a fleshy mask. His emotions a mystery save for the crude mechanics of his facial muscles, or the strange, erratic thumping of the fluid pump in his chest. My initial analyses classified humanity as paradoxical primitives. They had achieved interstellar travel, a feat of profound technical sophistication, yet their internal biology and societal structures seemed chaotic, rooted in savage competition. Their history, a document I studied with a mixture of horror and fascination, was a relentless chronicle of warfare, subjugation, and resource conflict. Still, we believed in the potential for harmony in all species. We saw their aggression as a byproduct of a difficult evolutionary path, a dissonance that could, with time and guidance, be resolved into accord. The invitation was Lyra's idea. Lyra is a composer of social symphonies, her home a spire of breathtaking grace where the most interesting minds of xylos gather. Her personal chord is one of warmth and genuine curiosity. Vixari, she had resonated to me one cycle, her tones shimmering with excitement. We must have the human Jacob for a strategy night. It is the perfect way to share our culture. An evening of friendly competition of scifi. I had my reservations. My preliminary report had noted humanity's obsession with what they called zero-sum games. Still, I agreed. A controlled environment, a game, was the ideal laboratory. Kalen, a master strategist whose mind hummed with the precise, sharp clarity of a striking crystal chime, would be there. His presence would ensure a high level of play. Lyra would be the gracious host. I would be the observer. And Jacob Vance would be the guest, the variable. The evening began as all such gatherings do. We congregated in Lyra's highest chamber, a circular room with a panoramic view of the glowing cityscape. The air was filled with the scent of resonating flora and the gentle, ambient music of the spire itself. We partook of light-infused nectars and crystalline wafers that dissolved on the tongue into pure energy. Jacob, he insisted we call him Jake, seemed uncomfortable but appreciative. He consumed his food with a focused, mechanical efficiency that was fascinating in its own right. "I'm really looking forward to this," he said, his voice a flat, narrow-band emission compared to our rich, harmonic speech. "I've heard you guys are serious about your games." "We are serious about S.A. Chala," Kalen corrected gently, his own voice a deep, resonant hum. "The spirit of the game. The goal is a beautiful contest of minds." Jake nodded, a quick jerking motion of his head. "Right, a beautiful contest, I get it." I noted even then the subtle disconnect. He heard the words but did not feel the resonance behind them. He understood the definition, not the meaning. The first game Lyra chose was Star Treader. It is an elegant game of interstellar expansion. The board is a holographic star field. Players begin with a single homeworld and expand their influence by building fleets, colonizing systems, and establishing trade routes. Resources are generated by the systems you control, and victory is achieved by reaching a certain threshold of cultural influence. A score derived from the number of star systems, the stability of your empire, and the completion of certain legacy projects. Grand, resource-intensive endeavors that benefit all players, but grant the builder the most prestige. The S.A. Chala of Star Treader is about balance and graceful expansion. Direct conflict is possible but is considered crude. A masterful player will win by creating an engine of such cultural and economic power that their victory becomes a gentle, inevitable sunrise, not a violent conquest. Attacking another player directly, especially early on, is seen as a sign of a weak and unimaginative player. We began. Kalen established a solid core territory, his moves precise and efficient. Lyra expanded in a sweeping, aesthetically pleasing arc, creating a beautiful spiral of interconnected systems. I pursued a strategy of research and development, aiming for a late-game surge through technological superiority. Jake's opening moves were odd. He expanded directly towards Kalen's border, placing his colonies in a configuration that was inefficient for resource generation, but optimal for blocking Kalen's most logical path of expansion. Kalen's cord flickered with momentary annoyance, but he dismissed it as a beginner's clumsiness. "A word of advice, Jake," Kalen resonated, his tone helpful. "You're boxing yourself in. You'll find your resource flow stagnates if you don't give your systems room to breathe." "Thanks for the tip," Jake said, his face unreadable. Then it happened. On his fourth turn, Jake invoked a rule. It was an obscure one, buried deep in the appendices of the game's codex, a text hundreds of cycles old. The rule was titled Tribute of Passage. It stated that if a player's established trade route passed directly through a system controlled by another player, the controlling player could demand a tribute of 1/4 of the resources passing through. The rule was a relic from an earlier, more aggressive version of the game, left in the codex for historical purposes. No one had used it in living memory. It was considered the height of poor sportsmanship, a move designed to cripple rather than compete. Jake had intentionally placed his colony in a choke point system. Kalen's primary trade route, vital for funding his next expansion, now passed directly through it. "I invoke the Tribute of Passage," Jake announced, his voice steady. The room fell silent. The ambient music of the spire seemed to dim. Kalen's resonant chord, usually so stable, wavered in disbelief. "You cannot be serious." "It's in the rules, isn't it?" Jake asked, gesturing to the holographic codex Lyra had summoned. He had already highlighted the relevant passage. "Page 217, Section 4, Paragraph B. That rule is a historical footnote," Lyra said, her voice a pained whisper of sound. "It violates the S.A. Chala of the game. It is not done. But it's legal, right?" Jake pressed. "The rules allow it." Legally, he was correct. The rule was there. Kalen, his honor demanding he abide by the written law no matter how distasteful, had to comply. The tribute shattered his economic engine. For the rest of the game, he was crippled, unable to recover. Jake, meanwhile, used the influx of resources to fuel a brute force expansion, ugly and sprawling, but effective. He ignored the legacy projects, focusing solely on the raw calculus of system acquisition. He won, but the victory felt like a clang of discordant metal in our harmonious world. "Good game," Jake said into the stunned silence. Kalen simply inclined his crystalline head, his inner light dimmed with a profound sense of insult. Lyra tried to restore the atmosphere, her own chords trembling. "A powerful strategy, Jake, very direct." I said nothing. I was recording. My function as a cultural analyst had taken over. This was not clumsiness. This was a deliberate, calculated action. He had studied the rules, not to understand the game's spirit, but to find its weaknesses. He had treated the Codex not as a guide to honorable competition, but as a legal document to be exploited. The second game was Echoes of the Void. This was a game of pure deduction and psychology. Each player is secretly assigned a silent chord, a unique harmonic signature. The goal is to identify the silent chords of the other players. On your turn, you can ping another player by playing a specific sequence of notes. Based on the resonance or dissonance of their reply, an involuntary reaction filtered through the game's interface. You gain clues. The essay Chala here is about empathy and intuition. You are meant to feel out your opponents, to understand their patterns of thought, to catch the subtle tells in their resonance. A direct, baseless accusation is a serious faux pas, costing you significant points if you are wrong. The game is a slow, delicate dance of inference. Jake did not dance. He approached the game like a codebreaker. On his first turn, he began a systematic process of elimination. He didn't try to intuit anything. He pinged me with the first possible combination in the sequence. Then Kalen with the second. Then Lyra with the third. His turns were lightning fast. He wasn't trying to guess correctly. He was simply gathering data. The small point penalty for a baseless ping was, to him, the acceptable cost of information acquisition. "That is not how the game is played," Kalen finally stated, his frustration becoming an audible, low-frequency hum. "You are stripping the art from it. You are not listening to the echoes. You are bombarding us with noise." "Just being methodical," Jake replied, his eyes fixed on the data stream he was compiling on his personal interface. "Each ping, right or wrong, eliminates possibilities. It's a simple logic puzzle." "It is not a logic puzzle," Lyra exclaimed, her usual warmth replaced by a sharp, crystalline edge. "It is a game of feeling, of connection. But it can be solved with logic," Jake countered, not unkindly, but with an unassailable certainty. "The most efficient path to the solution is to gather the most data in the shortest amount of time. The penalties are small enough to make a brute force approach viable." And he was right. While we were carefully trying to intuit each other's natures, he was running a diagnostic. He made 3 times as many pings as anyone else, accumulating a mountain of raw data. In the end, while we were still in the opening phase of our delicate dance, he simply announced all of our silent chords in a single turn. He had solved the puzzle, he had won, but he had not played the game. He had broken it down into a mathematical equation and found the answer. There was no artistry, no insight, no shared experience. Just cold, hard calculation. The mood in the room had shifted from shocked to sour. The beautiful symphony of the evening had become a dirge. Lyra looked genuinely hurt, as if Jake had not merely won a game, but had personally insulted her. Kalen was radiating a controlled fury, a low, dangerous thrum that I had only ever witnessed when he discussed ancient wars. He was a being of strategy, and he was watching his art form be desecrated, turned into a clumsy exercise in loophole arbitrage. It was then that Lyra, in a desperate attempt to salvage the evening and perhaps to guide Jake toward a more honorable form of play, suggested the third game. The Weaver's Gambit. This game, I thought, would surely be immune to his methods. It was almost purely cooperative. The players worked together to weave a complex pattern of light on a central holographic loom. The goal is a collective one, to create a pattern of the highest possible aesthetic value, judged by a complex algorithm that measures symmetry, harmony, and complexity. Individual players receive prestige points based on their contributions, but the primary victory condition is the score of the group as a whole. The essay Chala is absolute. It is a game about creating communal beauty. A player who sabotages the group pattern for personal prestige would be committing the ultimate social sin. Now, Jake, Lyra said, her voice soft and pleading, this game is different. We win or lose together. The goal is to create something beautiful, a shared masterpiece. I understand, Jake said, studying the loom. Co-op, maximize the group's score. For the first few rounds, it seemed to work. We laid down threads of shimmering light, building the foundation of a magnificent, flowing tapestry. Kalen's moves were bold and structural. Lyra's were graceful and connective. I added intricate, delicate sub-patterns. Jake's contributions were simple, even crude, but they connected to the main pattern. And then I noticed what he was doing. The scoring system for personal prestige had a small, almost unnoticeable clause. To encourage efficient play, it awarded a minuscule bonus for every connection made, regardless of its aesthetic value. In a normal game, this was negligible. The vast majority of a player's score came from contributing to the overall beauty of the final pattern. But Jake was not playing for the final pattern. He began to weave a tight, ugly knot of light in one corner of the loom. He connected his threads to the main tapestry, yes, but then he wove them back and forth over each other in a dense, chaotic scribble. Each tiny, pointless connection awarded him that minuscule prestige bonus. He was farming points. His actions were actively detracting from the overall beauty of the pattern. A hideous, discordant mass was growing like a cancer on our shared work of art. The algorithm, registering the asymmetry and chaos, began to lower our potential group score. "What are you doing?" I finally asked, my professional detachment giving way to genuine astonishment. "Maximizing my personal score," he said, not even looking up from his task. "The rules give points for connections. This is the most efficient way to make a lot of connections in a small space." "Are destroying the tapestry," Kalen boomed, his cord so sharp it almost cracked. "Our group score is plummeting. You are making us lose." "No," Jake said, pausing to look at him. His face held a look of genuine confusion, as if we were the ones who didn't understand. "The rules state that individual prestige is awarded for contribution. My contribution is a high number of connections. I am playing optimally according to my scoring metric." "Is not the metric that matters," Lyra cried out. "The beauty, the shared creation, that is what matters. That is the point." This was the moment of crystallization. Jake set down his controller and turned to face us. The faint, ambient light of the room glinted off his strangely opaque eyes. He said, and his tone was not aggressive but earnest. It was the tone of a teacher explaining a fundamental concept to a child. "Where I come from, games are a simulation of life. Life isn't about spirit or beauty. It's about finding an edge. It's about surviving. You have a system, any system, a game, an economy, a legal code, and it has rules. The winner is the person who understands those rules better than anyone else and uses them to their maximum advantage. Anything the rules do not explicitly forbid is permitted. The spirit of the game, that's just a story you tell yourselves to feel good about it. The rules are the game." He paused, letting his words sink in. They did not sink in. They crashed against our understanding of the universe like a rogue planetoid. "Winning," he concluded, "is a mindset, not a rule. The goal is to win. The method is to use the system as it is written, not as you wish it were. If there's a loophole, it's not a mistake, it's an opportunity. If the rules allow me to take all your resources, or brute force a puzzle, or farm points by making something ugly, then those are valid strategies. Blaming me for using them is like blaming a predator for hunting." The word hung in the air. Predator. It was as if a switch had been flipped in my analytical mind. The pieces of the puzzle, his dissonant presence, his disregard for S'Challa, his focus on systemic exploitation, his species, blood-soaked history, all snapped into a terrifyingly coherent picture. We had been treating him as a guest, a student, a potential partner. We had been trying to teach him our music. But he was not here to learn our music. He was here to deconstruct it, to analyze its composition, and to find the single, jarring note that would make the entire symphony collapse for his benefit. We were playing a game. He was hunting. I looked at Lyra, whose luminous form seemed to have shrunk, her light flickering with pain and disillusionment. I looked at Kalen, who was vibrating with a rage so profound it was almost silent, the fury of a warrior poet who has seen his temple defiled. And I looked at Jake Vance, the human, a creature of flesh and calculation, who had, in the space of a few hours, taught us more about his species than 1,000 diplomatic exchanges ever could. He wasn't evil. He wasn't malicious. He was simply human, and we had just discovered, to our profound and silent horror, what that truly meant. The game night was over. My analysis was just beginning. The silence that followed Jake's pronouncement was not the peaceful, contemplative silence we of the choral worlds cherish. It was a dead silence, a void of resonance where harmony had once been. Lyra, the gracious host, could no longer sustain her chord of welcome. It had fractured into a quiet, pained arrhythmia. Kalen's controlled fury had solidified into a state of rigid, cold distance. He looked at Jake not as a competitor, but as a contaminant. "The evening is concluded," Kalen stated, his voice flat, devoid of its usual resonant depth. It was the most profound insult he could offer, to speak without soul, to offer only the dry husk of words. He rose, his crystalline form catching the city lights in a shower of cold fire, and departed without another vibration. Lyra managed a weak, flickering pulse of courtesy. "Thank you for coming, Jake. It has been educational." She could not bring herself to look at him as she guided him to the transport platform. I remained seated. My function had superseded my social shock. The data was too important. When Jake returned to the room to retrieve his personal datapad, I finally spoke, my own chord intentionally modulated to be neutral, analytical. "Jake, may I ask you a question?" He seemed to brace himself, perhaps expecting a rebuke. "Sure, Vixari, go ahead." "Final analogy," I said. "You compared your strategy to a predator hunting. Is that how you see competition?" As a form of predation. He considered this for a moment, his head tilted. The gesture was alien, but the thoughtfulness was recognizable. "Yeah, I guess so. Not in a literal I want to eat you way, obviously. But in nature, a predator doesn't win because it's more honorable than its prey. It wins because it's smarter, or faster, or more adaptable. It uses the environment to its advantage. It finds the prey's weakness and exploits it. That's how it survives. That's how its species continues. We do not have predators on Xylos," I resonated, a simple statement of fact that now felt like a catastrophic vulnerability. Our evolutionary path was one of symbiosis. Cooperation strengthened the whole. Competition was a matter of who could create the most beneficial harmony. "Wow," Jake said, and for the first time his expression seemed to be one of genuine awe. "None ever, so you guys never had to worry about something hiding in the shadows, waiting for you to make a mistake." "The only shadows are those cast by the light," I replied. "Our struggles were with the environment, with cosmic radiation, with the geological instability of our world in its youth. We conquered these things together. The concept of a sentient being actively working to undermine another for personal gain, it is the subject of our darkest mythology. The dissonant one, the chord breaker." Jake let out a short, sharp bark of sound, a laugh. The alienness of it was jarring. "We call them innovators, or billionaires, or presidents. It depends on how successful they are." He picked up his datapad. "Look, Vixari, I'm sorry if I ruined your game night, honestly. I wasn't trying to be a jerk, I was just playing to win. It's all I know." His apology, I believe, was sincere, and that was the most terrifying part. His actions were not born of malice but of instinct. He was not breaking our rules. He was playing by a different, more ancient and brutal set of rules, rules that were encoded into his very being. Find the weakness, exploit the loophole, survive. When, after he left, I spent the rest of the night cycle in Lyra's chamber, the unfinished weaver's gambit still glowing in the center of the room, a beautiful tapestry marred by a single, ugly tumor of hyper-efficient point farming. My mind was racing, collating the data from the evening with my existing research on humanity. The pattern was undeniable. Their history was not just a history of war, it was a history of systemic exploitation. Their economic systems were rife with loopholes that allowed a few to amass immense wealth at the expense of the many. Their legal systems were vast, labyrinthine structures where justice was often secondary to the skill of the lawyer who could best manipulate the rules. Their politics were a constant battle of finding and exploiting procedural weaknesses to block opponents and force agendas. Even their mythology was filled with trickster gods, clever heroes who defeated powerful brutes not with strength, but with cunning, by subverting expectations and breaking unspoken agreements. They revered the loophole. They celebrated the one who could find the flaw in the system. I began to draft my report. The words flowed from me not in harmonious verse but in stark, clinical prose. I titled it, Nota Bene, an analysis of human competitive philosophy and its implications for interspecies relations. I bypassed the usual channels. This was too important for bureaucratic delay. I transmitted it directly to the High Council. My central thesis was this: humanity was not just a predator species in the biological sense. They were a predator species in the systemic sense. Their primary survival trait was not speed or strength, but the ability to analyze, deconstruct, and exploit any system they encountered. They were metapredators. Their prey was not other creatures, but the very fabric of rules that governed society. We, the coral worlds, had built a society based on the assumption that the rules were a framework for honorable interaction. Humans viewed rules as a set of attack vectors. The council convened an emergency session. The chamber, the resonant heart of our government, hummed with distress. Lyra and Kaelin were called as witnesses. Lyra recounted the events with a profound sadness, her testimony a mournful song of broken trust. Kaelin was blunt. "They are not to be trusted in any binding agreement," he vibrated, his chords sharp and clear as faceted diamond. "They do not honor the scifi of a contract, only its literal text. They will adhere to the letter of a treaty while violating its every intention. To them, a treaty is not a promise. It is a puzzle to be solved, a weapon to be turned against its cosigner." A counselor of the trade conclave, a being whose resonance was a complex tapestry of economic variables, argued against this. "This is an overreaction based on a trivial event, a game. We are negotiating vital resource exchanges with the Human Federation. Their offers are advantageous." "Are they?" I interjected, stepping into the center of the chamber. My own resonance was cold, focused. "Or have they simply analyzed our economic models and found a loophole we are not aware of? Are their advantageous offers a form of tribute, levied through a clause we have overlooked? We saw tonight that they are willing to cripple a competitor for a minor advantage in a meaningless game. What will they do when entire star systems are at stake?" Another counselor, one from the diplomatic corps, resonated with a chord of calming harmony. "Analyst Vixari, you are ascribing malice to what may simply be a cultural misunderstanding. Perhaps we can teach them the value of scifi. We can show them a better way." "Respect, counselor," I replied. "That is like trying to teach a shark the philosophy of vegetarianism. It is not that the shark is evil. It is that its entire existence is predicated on a fundamentally different principle. We see a system and ask, how can we work together honorably within this? They see a system and ask, how can I break this to my advantage? It is a difference not of culture, but of nature. Their evolution was forged in an environment of scarcity and lethal competition. Ours was forged in symbiosis and cooperation. We are fundamentally incompatible in any system that can be exploited." The debate raged for cycles. Some argued for quarantine, for cutting off all contact. Others argued for continued engagement, believing we could uplift humanity from its predatory mindset. The philosophical implications were staggering. Were we the naive prey, finally meeting the true predator of the galaxy? Was our entire civilization, built on trust and honor, simply a fragile ecosystem waiting to be devoured by a species that did not play by our rules? The turning point came when I presented the fourth and final piece of evidence from that fateful night. I had, in my analytical fervor, overlooked it at first. It was a game we did not get to play. The final game Lyra had planned was the ascension of the first ones. It is our most sacred and complex game, a multi-generational legacy game whose rules are written in our most ancient script. It simulates the entire history of the coral people, from our emergence as sentient crystals to our first steps into space. It is less a game and more a historical reenactment, a ritual of remembrance. In the data logs from Jake's personal interface, which he had unwittingly left connected to the house network, I found his preparatory files. He had not just downloaded the rules for Star Treader and Echoes of the Void. He had downloaded the entire codex for Ascension of the first ones, including all 12 volumes of historical and theological commentary. And my analysis software flagged a section he had bookmarked and cross-referenced dozens of times. It was an archaic protocol from the earliest, most desperate days of our history, when our society was on the brink of collapse from a stellar flare event. The protocol was called the Final Session. It stated that in a moment of existential crisis, a leader could cede their entire, resonant sovereignty, all their people, territory, and resources, to another leader to ensure the survival of the species as a whole, even if their own lineage ended. In the game, it was a dramatic, last-resort move for a player about to be eliminated by a non-player event, allowing them to transfer all their assets to another player of their choice. It was designed to prevent a game from ending prematurely due to bad luck. It was a mechanism of mercy. Jake had annotated it. His notes were chillingly clear. Potential exploit, he had written. Offer player X a future consideration, e.g., throw the next game of Star Treader their way in exchange for invoking Final Session on turn 2. Immediate, insurmountable asset advantage. Game over. He had planned to bribe another player to commit an act of game suicide, handing him the entire game on a silver platter. He had looked at our most sacred ritual, a memorial to our near extinction and our salvation through unity, and had seen nothing but a lever for an easy win. He was going to turn our history into a hustle. I presented this to the council. I showed them his notes. I let the cold, alien logic of his plan resonate in the chamber. The debate ended. The calming chords of the diplomats faded into horrified silence. The calculating hum of the trade masters became a low thrum of dread. They finally understood. It was not about games. It was about philosophy. It was about the nature of the soul. The final decision was not unanimous, but it was decisive. It was not a declaration of war or an act of hostility. It was an act of self-preservation, of societal quarantine. The Coral World's Directorate of Interspecies Relations issued Policy 734, subsection Gamma. It is known, informally, as the Vance Protocol. It states that no citizen of the Human Federation is to be permitted to participate in any choral activity that involves a formal rule set and a competitive element. This includes strategy games, economic simulations, academic contests, and even certain artistic competitions. They are welcome as tourists, as observers, as diplomatic envoys in carefully controlled environments. But they are not allowed to play our games. The official reason given was irreconcilable differences in competitive philosophy. But we all knew the truth. We could not play with them because they were not playing. They were dissecting. They were hunting. I often sit in my analysis chamber now, looking at the holographic star field. I think of Jacob Vance. I do not hate him. In a strange way, I admire his species' terrifying adaptability, their relentless drive. They are survivors. They have faced down predators, plagues, and their own self-destructive nature, and they have clawed their way to the stars. They did it by questioning every system, by pushing every boundary, by exploiting every weakness. They are the ultimate optimizers. But there is a cost to that optimization. In their relentless quest to master the rules, I fear they have lost the ability to appreciate the music. They have learned how to win the game, but they have forgotten why it is played. And so we watch them from a distance, these strange, opaque beings of flesh and ambition. We watch them expand, trade, and politic, their every action a potential exploit, their every treaty a potential loophole. They are a dissonant chord in the symphony of the galaxy, a chord of terrifying power. And we must ask ourselves the question that now keeps our strategists and philosophers awake through the long, silent cycles. What happens when they decide that existence itself is a game, and that the universe's rules are also made to be broken? We have banned them from our game rooms. We can only hope that is enough, for now.